this is just the beginning.
Welcome to Black-Owned Businesses Post-Pandemic, an Axios virtual event. I'm Hope King, business reporter at Axios, and I'm coming to you from New York, New York. We're thrilled to be hosting this event alongside the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation annual legislative conference and during National Small Business Week. Thank you to Facebook for making this conversation possible on the economic recovery of Black-owned businesses. Welcome to our audiences on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and on Axios.com. Join the conversation today on Twitter with @Axios and the hashtag Axios Events. Over the next 30 minutes, I'll be joined by my colleague, Courtenay Brown. We'll examine how Black-owned small businesses have had to adapt to the disproportionate negative impacts of the pandemic and what resiliency looks like. Our first guest is the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. She's also the Congresswoman for Ohio's 3rd District, Representative Joyce Beatty, joining us from Columbus, Ohio. Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, Hope, and thank you so much for having me on today.
We are so delighted to have you, Congresswoman. So we know that the pandemic has impacted communities unequally from both a healthcare perspective and an economic perspective. And earlier this year, one study from Yelp had found that more than 1,300 Black-owned businesses have had to close, and about 400 of those or more have had to reopen twice or more. I would love for you to start by talking about how the CBC and Congress are aiming to help Black small business owners through all of these really, unequal times and equitable times.
Well, first of all, let me just say thank you for bringing awareness to this. We know even pre the pandemic, minority-owned businesses, specifically Black-owned businesses, the numbers were already down. Hard to get access to capital, hard to do the improvements. And when COVID hit and we came up with the PPP, it was equally as hard because in those first rounds of dollars, we did not have dollars for the really small businesses, those what we like to call the barbershops and the beauty salons, those with 5 or 8 employees, because the rules of engagement always seemed that it changed, even for those businesses that thought they had relationships with their banks. But if they had not received a loan in the amount that they were asking for, they were excluded until, thank goodness, we start speaking up in Congress, especially the Congressional Black Caucus. We were all in because we know when you look at small businesses, we knew they could not survive. When you think about 51% of small-owned businesses couldn't exist 3 months, after not having dollars in their bank accounts to resume and to sustain their employment. We're also looking at how we could be helpful. So we started speaking out, meeting with small businesses, getting information from them, and actually walking them through the process. And it's still very difficult. Many of those businesses we know would not be able to sustain it or be able to, after the pandemic, be able to regroup to open back up. So when we think about the value of the Congressional Black Caucus and how we had to work with them, many of us small business owners, I know firsthand as a former small business owner, how hard it is to make payroll in a normal time. And here's the good news, 95% of the Biden-approved PPP loans went to small businesses with 20 or less employees. And that was very helpful. We know that Biden's committed to a 50% increase in contracting with small, disadvantaged, targeted businesses. So that's going to be helpful. And I can tell you, it's the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus, making sure that we're reaching out to them. We're working with our chambers of commerce, especially Black Chamber of Commerce's. We're working with banks, setting up protege programs. We also have to look to our MDIs. And I know this is a lot, But it's so important for us to educate our communities and our constituents so they know that we are working on their behalf.
It's not only letting them know that you are working on their behalf, but still to educate them on how to get access to those funds that you mentioned that were so critical. After the point of access, what have been some other challenges that the business community from the Black community have faced specifically?
Well, it's been very difficult when you think of people losing their homes, people not being able to work, dealing with their family situations. There were many people when children were not in school, the parents had to stay home. So some of those individuals left their jobs, which means those small businesses did not have employees. And so it's been very difficult that they had many trained employees who had to stay home with their families. Now they're trying to regroup and retrain to get new employees. And that's been very difficult. So we've been looking at training programs, getting those individuals who weren't in the workplace now to be in the workplace. And we've been working in our districts. This is our community district work. And I can tell you that members of the Congressional Black Caucus, we're in our districts. We're touring businesses. We're meeting with them. A good thing when you look at the number of eateries, to give you a great example of dollars that have been going out with the new funding sources, I was very pleased as I was touring small businesses just in my district 2 days ago. I met with the owner of a restaurant, and he was so pleased that he was able to stay open, order all of the food that he needed, pay his employees. Why? Because he was able to get some of the PPP dollars and he got a loan. He did not get it in the first year and a half, and he said it almost devastated him. But he had been working with my congressional office, and many of our members do this. They're on the ground. They're working with those owners to make sure that they keep their business open, because hope is more than just keeping the business open. Think about it. When they can pay their employees then put money back into the economy. And so it's very important for us to have a great education and awareness program. That was one of the biggest things we discovered, that many people did not know how to access the dollars for their small business.
And as you mentioned, when you have businesses revitalized and back up and running, that helps to employ people. We know that the unemployment rate for Black employees in the country are nearly double the national average at about 9%. And that's as of August's business, survey of folks here in the US. And one other survey that's also come out is the Small Business Pulse survey from the census. You have nearby states to Ohio, like New York and Pennsylvania, and those that have responded in those states have said the impact has been much more negative than in Ohio. So comparatively, there are still some differences across the country. How are you seeing that play out?
Well, as you know, when you look to the Congressional Black Caucus, we represent 17 million Black Americans and 78 million Americans. And so we're all over the place. And what you're seeing is many communities have been devastated. And when you couple it with what's happening, for example, in New Orleans with the hurricanes, and then on top of it with the COVID and the Delta variant, it's very difficult. And you mentioned a key point. When we hear, unemployment has gone down and people are working, well, those numbers were never the same for minority-owned businesses, especially Black-owned businesses. The numbers were always double, and we're still dealing with that. So I think you have to look at everything. You have to look at what location you're in. You have to look at the businesses. But I can tell you, I'm glad you mentioned some of the research data, because when you look at the data that's out there, it will tell you the disparities. It will tell you how much work we have to do. And while we're making great strides with the billions of dollars that we have set aside through the work that the Biden-Harris administration has done, with the work that we've done in Congress, I can tell you my caucus has been in the forefront fighting for the people and fighting for businesses, especially small businesses, to stay open. We've learned a lot. We learned in that first round of relief dollars that we weren't equipped to get the dollars out, and the dollars weren't going to the small businesses. So they've been very thankful that organizations have been working with them, and we have been out in the forefront as the Congressional Black Caucus.
I believe this year is the CBC Foundation's annual legislative conference. I think it's the 50th year, if I'm not mistaken. What's been on the agenda?
I am so glad you asked me about that as we start kicking off our Congressional Black Caucus Foundation's annual legislative conference, talking about Black excellence unparalleled. We have so many workshops that people can watch online that deals with narrowing the wealth gap. It talks about the economy. It talks about the effect on small businesses. I can tell you I was so excited to have a workshop that has so many prominent individuals who are experts in the field, who've been working with different communities. And so we're excited that we had people like the scholar Michael Eric Dyson. We had Mr. Clooney that works with the Black Alliance. We actually had Jason Wright, who is now the first Black NFL owner. So when you think about that, and he came from McKinsey doing all kinds of research, and now here is a young Black American making history. And then we look at people like Harper Hill, who's been out in the forefront far beyond being an actor on TV, but being very, very engaged in volunteering. He was in Tulsa when we looked at Greenwood and what was happening there. So I'm just really excited. And then we had Alicia Garza. She's been out in the forefront, making sure that we understand that there are disparities when it comes to Black Americans. And that's just my workshop, Hope. When you think of the 100 or so workshops across the course of the upcoming week that you're going to hear, you're going to see celebrities, you're going to have people just really getting people engaged. And I think it's also a part of building hope. We've been through some very difficult and devastating times, and we know the atmosphere certainly has not been one that has always put Black Americans out front. As a matter of fact, when we look at everything from what we're going through in our business world, when we look at how we're fighting against all of the injustices and having to work with corporate America to make sure that minority and Black businesses and brown businesses get access to capital. Lots of workshops will be on that. And I have to say, it's also the 50th anniversary of the Congressional Black Caucus. Lots of work, civil rights, voting rights, education, environmental justice, so many things that we're so excited about because we're moving the needle. And people will no longer say, when they're asking about the economy and they're asking about small businesses, what's the CBC doing? The Congressional Black Caucus is doing a lot. And our constituents are writing to us every day saying, thank you. Thank you. My business was able to stay open. Thank you for recommending me for a national award because that goes in my portfolio. Right here in my district, I am so proud of a very small starting architectural firm that's now moved his way up to being one of the national and the largest Black architectural firm that we have in the country, one of the largest. And he just received, Moody Nolan just received the national award from the National Architectural Institute. And we were a part of it, supporting and writing a letter of nomination for him. Or that small family restaurant that's staying open because we were engaged with them. Those are the stories that we want to tell to build encouragement.
Well, I'm glad you were able to share those with us, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And next, we have a View from the Top segment with my colleague, SVP of Events and Creative Strategy at Axios, Kristen Burkhalter.
Thanks, Hope. I'm now excited to be joined by Alvin Bowles, who is the Vice President of Business Engineering and Partner Solutions at Facebook. Hi, Alvin. Welcome to Axios.
Hello. How you doing? Thank you for having me.
Of course. Let's jump straight in. We have a lot to cover. Many small businesses have had to completely change their way of operating due to the needs at the time. I'd love to hear from your perspective on how Facebook is supporting small businesses, specifically Black-owned small businesses.
Well, again, thank you again for having me. And I love the question. I think that for us at Facebook, small and medium businesses are a part of our DNA. We believe it's our responsibility to support small businesses as well as aspiring entrepreneurs, or as younger folks say, the creator economy, by providing tools and resources that can help them build, sustain, and grow their businesses during this challenging time. Specifically for Black-owned businesses, we focus on areas where we've consistently seen small businesses need the most help. First is in training. We have a program called Facebook Elevate. And Elevate is a program that's committed to reaching 1 million Black and 1 million Latinx members of the community over the next 3 years with digital training and skills. And we've done this all over the country. Another is a program called Buy Black Friday. Last year, we saw over 40% of Black businesses close due to the pandemic, substantially more than other small businesses. In order to support this Black-owned small businesses during the holiday season, we launched a campaign to encourage shoppers and buy Black as often as possible. We all know that during this holiday season, businesses really rely upon the holiday season to be able to actually drive a tremendous amount of revenue. And so we wanted to focus on highlighting Black businesses and give people the ability to discover these businesses. In fact, last month, we launched the Buy Black Summit. And big thanks to Ron Busby, CEO of the U.S. Black Chamber, for his participation as one of our speakers at this inaugural event. We're just so inspired by being able to actually really connect businesses and ideas with people and consumers. We really just want to close that gap between ideation and execution. And we believe that Facebook is an opportunity to be able to do so.
Really impressive efforts. Thanks for sharing that. Let's pivot a little bit, because I know we have some other exciting things to talk about during this conversation. Last week, you released a new global report on the state of small businesses during the pandemic. Tell us about a few of the interesting results.
Well, I think that one, it's a great question. At Facebook, we just believe in holding ourselves accountable. We audit the impact on diverse communities. And for example, with our annual diversity report, which we began in 2014, and reports the progress towards a more diverse and inclusive culture at Facebook. And specifically for businesses, last week, as you mentioned, we released our 8th edition of the Global State of Small Business Report. That's an important document that allows us to be able to understand that, as an example, minority-led businesses in the U.S. were 50% more likely to report being closed, having reduced employment, or having lower sales compared to this time last year. Many small businesses are still struggling financially, and cash flow has been cited as one of the biggest concerns since this survey. There's still a long way to go. And as we've seen the sort of country and world start to see the light at the end of the tunnel for this pandemic, we've seen some positive trends as well. And so it's important to note that, the closure rate for businesses in the US in February was 22%, falling to about 16% by the time of this survey. And another positive trend that we're seeing is that the use of digital tools across the board increased during the pandemic. It's up again at the time of the survey of 88% of all businesses compared to 81% in February. It's just important to note that individuals are trying to leverage the digital economy to be able to actually decrease that distance between, as I mentioned, innovation and execution, and trying to figure out the best way to be able to leverage opportunities to have individuals discover their businesses. And we feel like there's an enormous responsibility that we have. And as we head into this holiday season, it's now more important than ever to really focus on the discovery economy, and that every good idea deserves to be found. And we certainly feel like we have a tremendous responsibility in bridging that gap.
It's always good to hear good news in these times. Let's go a little deeper on some of that research that you just mentioned, and tell me what is so important about the next few months for small businesses.
Yes, I think that the key is the research shows that 1/5 of small businesses globally expect to make more than half of their annual revenue during the holiday season. And this jumps to 25% for minority-owned businesses in the US. And as I mentioned, good ideas deserving to be found. This is really about making sure that every single business, every single idea, every single entrepreneur deserves an audience. And at the heart of every business is a great idea. We support small businesses with curated tools and solutions to really help their ideas get found. And one of the things that we've just launched recently is the Boost with Facebook Good Ideas season. Beginning next month, small businesses can access free digital skills training, thought leadership, and networking opportunities focused on the digital skills that I just talked about needed for this new economy and to really have a successful holiday season. We really are trying to make this across all of Facebook's family of apps, specifically Facebook and Instagram, to really help them understand how best to find an audience, whether it be through our Facebook Shops program or things that we call drops, where we highlight a specific business and have a directed campaign specifically at audiences that have expressed interest in that particular merchandise. We're trying to figure out the best way to actually turn things from the creator economy that are buzzworthy and interesting into real, tangible, opportunities for financial empowerment for businesses that really want to be discovered. We're really, really excited about this, and we think that we've got really something interesting that can be scaled globally, not just in the US.
Super exciting. Can't wait to see that roll out. Before we wrap, what is something else new or exciting that you're personally working on or Facebook is committing resources to for the remainder of the year?
I think that's a great question. I think that to mark National Small Business Week in the US, Facebook just announced 2 new ways for diverse businesses to become, more fluid in terms of their access to capital. And the first is really this Facebook Invoice Fast Track program. As I mentioned in our jobs report, we understood that the biggest thing that individuals had is once they've gotten the sale is the liquidity associated with what they need to continue their business as a going concern. We will fund up to $100 million in invoices on an ongoing basis. And this program is available for all for-profit, diverse-owned companies that are headquartered in the US, that are members of our key supplier diversity and policy partner programs. We're really excited about this. And the second is the new small business funding resource, where we're connecting businesses with access to grants, because we certainly believe that good ideas deserve an opportunity to be found, and our Good Ideas Exchange is something that we are really proud of. A lot of this can be accessed through our website at about.fb.com/news. And we're just so proud to be able to be a part of this economy and this community.
Alvin, thank you for all the worthy work that you do and Facebook is doing around this topic. Really appreciate you joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And now over to my colleague, Courtenay Brown.
Thanks, Kristen. I'm Courtenay Brown. I'm the markets reporter at Axios. Our final guest today is Ron Busby. He's the president and CEO of US Black Chambers, and he joins us today from Washington, D.C. It's good to see you, Ron.
It's good to be here, and thank you so much for having me on this afternoon.
Yeah, you have an interesting vantage point because all of the regional Black chambers of commerce kind of feed into your organization and you're in constant contact with them, is my understanding. So from where you sit, how far along are we in terms of Black small businesses recovering from the pandemic?
Great question, Courtney. We heard a great deal about the number of loss of Black-owned businesses across the country in 2020. We know that between the months of February and April, we actually lost 41% of the Black-owned businesses. Nearly 442,000 businesses were closed, many of them to never reopen again. And that has placed a huge challenge, as you know, that there are 2.6 million Black firms. And so when you lose 400,000 of them, that places a huge burden on the communities in which they lived and operated, as well as the employees and the customers that presented and worked with those firms. And so businesses that are owned by African Americans and Black people across the country are starting to feel extremely optimistic about the future, but the challenges still exist. The number one challenge for Black-owned businesses is obviously access to capital. And we know that many Black-owned businesses were forced to close because of lack of information, lack of relationships, and where there's a stimulus package that was created, many Black businesses, over 70% said they either got no funding at all or far less than what they needed. And so as we look to the future, many of them are looking to the US Black Chamber to consider and to make sure that the federal government is looking at the needs of Black-owned businesses. I say this, Courtney, so often that when the federal government creates programs for Black-owned businesses, many times it's under the broad brush of minority programs. And historically found that Black businesses have suffered, whereas white women businesses have been the businesses that have benefited the most by minority programs. And so the U.S. Black Chamber is talking to not only federal governments, state and local governments, but corporate America as well, to say, let's be intentional as we look forward to creating programs to assist us. Let's make sure that they really are reaching the numbers as well as the businesses that need it the most.
Yeah, let's flash back for a second. I think there's been a ton of coverage. We've done some reporting even on the kind of disproportionate aid that was distributed through the stimulus package. But I mean, how much would you say the recovery among small businesses is due to some efforts from the government, whether it be from the federal or from the state level? And how much of the effort would you say has come from kind of the private sector?
Great question. I think the federal government has seen the challenges. We even saw our president go to Tulsa, Oklahoma, to make the commitment of increasing the spend with Black firms and minority firms from 5% to 15%. But the challenge really lies in how do you find those businesses? Many corporations, as you've been discussing, say that, yes, Ron, we'd love to do more business with Black firms, but we either can't find them or they don't have the size and the scale. And so the U.S. Black Chamber has created our own Black business certification program to ensure that Black businesses can be found, can be developed, and can create relationships for the communities in which they operate, the employees which they own, as well as the private sector and government sector that are looking for them. Last year, we heard $6.6 billion of commitment made by corporate America, but we've actually been only able to trace 250 million of those dollars that have actually hit the streets, nonprofits, and Black-owned businesses. And so accountability is important, metrics are important, and intentionality is extremely important. And so many of our businesses are looking to the U.S. Black Chamber to ensure that we're carrying their voice, their message, as well as the businesses that they own and operate in reference to the products and services that they create and service.
What about going forward? What types of aid, again, either from the government or from the private sector, are you hoping for in terms of helping Black small businesses across the country?
Well, I think you'll see that in the infrastructure programs that are coming across now, there's going to be a great deal of spend. You've heard conversations in the reference of trillions of dollars, but we've got to make sure that we have businesses that are ready, that are certified, that have the revenue, as well as the credit and cash available to take advantage of those opportunities. And so we see that the future looks great in reference to some of the stimulus packages going forward. You saw early on the payroll protection plan was really a large stimulus package, but most Black businesses weren't able to participate because of the fact that it was for companies that had employees. And we know the majority of Black firms don't have employees. Of the 2.5 million had no employees. And so we had to go back in and make sure that we adjusted those packages, those stimulus opportunities, to make sure that our Black businesses could participate. And so as you see new programs being rolled out, you'll see that the U.S. Black Chamber is there to make sure that small, that diverse, and primarily Black firms are included in the conversation, as well as being included in the stimulus packages, as well as the processes being created to make sure that all businesses have the opportunity to participate.
I think one of the most interesting and possibly most unexpected things that happened during the pandemic was this huge surge of entrepreneurs deciding that now was the time to start a new business. Are you hearing that? Are you seeing that across small, Black small businesses across the country?
Yeah, I think when you looked at how do you create success, how do you create revenue in our communities, the fastest way to be able to do that is to create new businesses, to create new entrepreneurs. Black women have always been the fastest growing business segment in reference to new business opportunities. But that was created out of a need. Many of those businesses were forced out of work. Many of us were called essential workers, weren't able to be rehired. And so we were forced to go into business for ourselves. But also, I think the need for Black consumers, corporate America, as well as government saying, hey, we want to make sure that we're spending more money with Black businesses. I think that the Black culture has said, now it's time for me during that 18 months, 2-year period where many of us were forced to be at home, to create those business plans, to develop banking relationships, to go out and really find a niche for themselves. And so that itself has really created opportunities for our businesses to be able to expand and start. And so the U.S. Black Chamber, who's founded on really 5 pillars: advocacy, access to capital, contracting, entrepreneurial training, and chamber development, has been a critical voice as well as a learning opportunity for our businesses to not only start, but to grow, as well as to be able to hire, to be able to take advantage of some of the opportunities going forward.
Right. And I want to wish you a happy National Small Business Week. I got to imagine this is the equivalent of the Super Bowl, maybe, for U.S. Black Chambers. So what are you all doing to celebrate?
Well, this is a great week for us. Last week, the U.S. Black Chamber launched 2 great initiatives. First is our Buy Black platform. So for Black-owned businesses, we can now be certified as Black-owned businesses. In the past, we were certified as minority-owned businesses. We're partnering with American Express. Issa Rae has now come on board to really be the face and the voice of that platform. And so we're really excited about that. The second launch was really our relationship with the 180 Black radio stations and 12 Black TV stations, all coming up under the umbrella of the National Association of Black-owned Broadcasters. Now they will be under the leadership of the U.S. Black Chamber. And so not only will we continue to be the voice of Black business, we will now have a vehicle to be able to share that information across the country with our 385,000 Black-owned businesses and 150 chambers that we own and operate across the country. This week is obviously an extremely exciting week for us at CBC. It's a Congressional Black Caucus. It's National Small Business Week. And lastly, we're preparing for our national conference, which will be held October the 13th and 15th here right outside of Washington, D.C. at the National Harbor at the MGM Grand. And so all of those things coming together right now really gives us an optimistic future of Black-owned businesses, as well as our relationships across the country.
Very good. It's good to see you, Ron, and thank you so much for joining Axios.
Thank you for having us this afternoon, and we're looking forward to continuing our work across the country.
And thank you all for joining us for another virtual conversation that's made everyone smarter, faster. And we want to thank Facebook for sponsoring the event and making it possible. For more information, or if you want to sign up for any of the Axios newsletters, including my newsletter, Axios Closer, visit axios.com/newsletters or download the Axios app. Thank you again, and we'll see you on axios.com.